Welcome back to another exciting episode of Life in Cyber. We have a special guest today, Drew Kirkpatrick. We're going to be talking about some of his background, what he's doing today, and a bunch of other stuff. So let's do it.
I think a little bit of background, Drew, if you wouldn't mind, can you share a little bit about what you do and your kind of career?
Yeah,
you don't have to give specific names of where you work or anything if you don't want to. But
no, that's fine. That's fine. So I'm a pen tester today. I'm old, so I've done a lot of weird things. Kind of started in psychology way back in the day, and ended up being a psychology nerd who wrote a lot of code and ended up going on a grad school for computer science, and then left doing some kind of R&D for the Navy as a civilian, and ended up working at a defense contractor in New York that Josh may know about. And I was there for a couple of years, and that was kind of my first pivot into cybersecurity. I guess that was probably 10 years ago. And I had been in aerospace before, and really wanted to get something a little bit more geographically flexible. My wife has a crazy research job that was very specific in locations, and working for one military base wasn't really the solution we needed to our dual career lifestyle. And so I moved to cybersecurity and did that at that company for a couple of years. And I kind of found that I missed the technical work, like coding all the time. And I kind of pivoted back into just technical work. So I went to become a pen tester full time. I've been doing that for about 6 years now as a consultant, and started off doing a little bit of everything, like a lot of pen testers do. But these days I'm at a firm called Trusted Tech, and we focus a little bit more. So I'm really more of an application nerd these days. Pen testing web apps, reverse engineering mobile apps or desktop apps, stuff like that. Writing tools on the side when I get bored, get that coding time in. And I love consulting. I like new challenges, every week or every couple of weeks, right? It's always something new to learn. And especially with web apps, mobile apps, devs are always making new and unique mistakes. It's never the same stuff. So I do enjoy that about it. So that's where I am now. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So.
Train?
Got the train.
Sorry, that's me.
That wasn't your womp womp sound effect.
So you do a lot of web app testing and web penetration testing?
Yeah. Sometimes external pen tests, but
okay. Where do you fit as far as the tool set? Is there any merit to using Kali Linux for what you do versus commercial software? Do you write your own plugins and test that way? What is your favorite way to start about testing, I guess?
Well, it definitely involves a lot of cursing at Burp Suite. That's just part of the nature of doing web apps. Is everyone uses Burp Suite. We all do. And it is the best and the worst thing to happen to us. I mean, when you stare at the same program 8 hours a day, you're going to know it inside out, and you see the good stuff and you see the bad stuff. It is an immensely powerful tool, and there's a reason everyone uses Burp Suite. But on the flip side, it's a huge antique monolithic Java app with everything in the kitchen sink in it. So it's creaky, it's buggy. They have really ramped up production, dev on it the past couple of years, and really upping the feature sets in it, which is very impressive lately. But with that comes the bugs. But it's everyone's using that. Now, as far as what you're using as far as platforms, that's really up to the consultant. I personally, when I'm doing web apps, I still like using Kali Linux. I hate Mac with burning passion. I hate iOS. I've got 8 iOS phones and tablets on my desk for mobile testing, but I don't like them. But you have to use them. But with mobile testing, I do actually go out of Mac because I'm connecting directly to hardware. So personally, I like using Kali Linux for web app testing and a lot of stuff when I can. But it doesn't really matter with the web.
So for the newbies out there, you would recommend getting familiar with Burp Suite to get a leg up in the industry?
If you want to do web app stuff, I mean, even our network pen testers, they all have a Burp license. Like, if you're going to do anything in a corporate environment, you're going to run across web apps, and you're going to want a peek under the hood as to what's going on with that traffic. They may not be gurus at it, but they want to take an initial look before they pull someone in from the AppSec team. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great tool. I don't know anyone who has ever starved being a web app pen tester. It's in big demand all the time. Lots of companies need that level of work. So certainly one of our larger teams at my company, just because we're very busy. So yeah, and if you like it, I think there's a kind of a rule of thumb, right? And I want to couch this to the younger generation that this isn't the way everything works, right? But there are certain trends, and that is folks with an IT background generally really love network pen testing, right? They really fall into that. And people generally with a stronger dev background tend to really like application pen testing because you kind of get that developer brain going on. That's not always the case. I've got plenty of amazing colleagues in application space that don't even like programming. So you see all sorts of things, but there's a decent trend there that if you're earlier interested in the coding or the IT side, that might give you some hints as to what the offensive side you might enjoy the most. So
yeah, programming sucks, but it's okay that you can be wrong and still work with it.
That's okay. We can agree that you were wrong. So,
so Drew, I've got to ask.
Sorry, I love coding.
Please jump. I've got to ask another question too. So, leaning into your pen testing expertise, John and I both work in higher education, and I've been mentoring a lot of students in the operations sector for IT for a long time. And the one thing I get a lot are students who are like, "Hey, I'm getting a cybersecurity degree, or I want to get into cyber," and I ask them about, "Well, what in cyber do you want to do?" And every single one of them says, "Well, I really like pen testing." And my first thing that I tell them every single time is, guys, there aren't that many pen testing jobs out there. Like, as far as cybersecurity sector goes, like, it's very broad, but you're talking like the most competitive of competitive type of roles, right? Like, help me understand, like, am I giving good advice on that? Telling people like, hey, you're going to have to look at like cybersecurity as a whole and not just the one, narrow pen testing area. Is it that hard to get that job in there? Is it highly competitive? Those types of things.
I find it's an area that generally doesn't really have entry-level jobs. And I think that frustrates a lot of the younger generation. They want to jump straight to it. But like, it is very rarely your first job, right? It is typically your second or third job, especially on the consulting side. Because if I'm talking to a client and I'd like to see them make all these changes to increase their security posture, but they can't or they won't because of other business considerations. Well, I've worked on business stuff. I can understand that security isn't their job. But if you're coming hot off the books where security is everything and that's all you know, and you like that context of how this fits into everything else, you're going to have a hard time communicating effectively. And I think you just need that broader experience before you can figure out how to fit security into an internal organization where you're working, or for me, external clients, because at the end of the day, it's mostly a communications job, right? The tech stuff is great and it's fun, but if you can't communicate, there's a very small subset of jobs for you out there, especially further up the chain. And I think you really need to hammer. My boss, I think, said it great. He's like, when we're looking for a consultant, we're really looking for communication skills. It's way easier to teach someone to be an elite hacker than it is to teach them to be able to write well and communicate effectively. So, it's a great job. I love it personally. Some people hate it because we're not really building things, right? For every one of us destroying things and writing reports about it, you need 1,000 people actually building and securing things, right? Like, the blue team is the thing. We are an extra sideshow to help the blue team in very specific situations. Blue team is the thing, right? Unless you're a criminal, and I'm not going to encourage anyone to go do that. Please don't. So, and I know a lot of younger generation hates to hear that, right? They really want to know what's the quick way in, especially the ones that say, hey, I want to be a red teamer by 23. And yeah, I know some people that pull that off, but that's really, really rare. So you focus on other jobs first.
I think they build it up in their head and they have this idea and imagination of how glorious it's going to be a pen tester. And while that may be true, there's going to be some things that you probably feel achievement with, especially if you're looking at some of Josh's crap that he's built and you tear it down within a matter of seconds. But, there's got to be a boring side to what you do as well. Like, can you tell us, like, some of the boring stuff that pen testers actually have to go through? Or
Hey,
some
before
of the
before you do,
stuff?
I have a pretty solid reputation. All right, back off.
With your wife, I'm sure you do, and maybe one or two of your kids.
Yeah, reporting. I mean, especially as a consultant, I have to do reporting, but I've been doing it long enough, and the tooling in my company is pretty good that I honestly probably only spend about 20% of my time doing that. So I'm honestly probably spending about 80% of my time doing heavy end technical work, which I think is a fantastic divide. Now, if I was on an internal team, it would probably be significantly less than that. But on the bright side, if I was on an internal team, I'd have much more influence in trying to enact those changes. Whereas as a consultant, I'm throwing recommendations to the wall and making my best argument and helping them as best I can. But at the end of the day, it's up to them, right? It's not my job to jump in there into their process. Hopefully they hired me because they want to take it seriously. But when you're doing it on an internal team, you're actually in the room. You have a much better platform, usually, to make those arguments. I see a lot of clients where I can tell that their security team has been telling them the exact same thing for years, because I see the glee in their security team's face when we steamroll through something, because they listen to us as the outside consultants, whereas the internal team, and I hate seeing that in an organization, but it does happen.
Did you think you find that easier being a consultant rather than being the internal team? Because I know exactly what you're talking about. When you've been kind of harping on something for so long, and then that consultant comes in and tells you, see, and you're just like, this is what I've been trying to do.
Yep. I think they have pros and cons on both sides. I think working with people is definitely a huge benefit being an internal team. I think you have a much more satisfaction in seeing things resolved and fixed. And I think you gain a better appreciation for what that balance is. Very few companies are in business to do security. There's defense things that's the number one priority, but that's not the case almost anywhere else. And figuring out that balancing act and picking the right bang for the buck for what resources you have is a skill very well learned on the internal team. And it's you really need to have that understanding of the consulting side, I think, to be effective, but you're not going to get that on the consulting side. I think you kind of need to have that before you get there.
Hearing you say that, I kind of think about it, and I kind of feel like you guys should have like psych payment or like mental counseling payment, because someone from the inside, I vent to the people who are doing the third-party assessments or coming in and looking at things, and then break it to where I can say, I've been telling you that we need to fix it. But I feel like you guys get vented to a lot. Is that just me? Am I the oddball out venting to people?
No, actually, I don't see that too often. It does happen. Right. I think it's usually more subtle. I had a client that it was a web app test, and it was I ended up on the server's file system, and I see a flag, literally a CTF flag on the root of the file system with my company's name on it. And sure enough, I opened up and it's a flag. I was like, and I called him up. I was like, did you put CTF flags on your server? And he's like, yep. I was like, you knew we were going to be in there, didn't you? He's like, yep. So a little bit more subtle. That wasn't terribly subtle, but because we don't get on the file system of a web app server on every engagement. That's kind of a special engagement. So it's at least for an external web app, one that's on the internet. So internal apps, it's a little bit more prevalent. So those can stand up to being a little bit more of a dumpster fire than typical. If your web app's floating out on the internet, you're getting free pen tests every day, all day long. So if you've got disastrous stuff, you usually know about it pretty quick. So
One of the
But no, I don't. I think clients mostly are pretty mature about things. So
one of the other things we talk about when it comes to like pen testing is, I mean, not just competition or how many jobs are out there, but also in the sense of like a majority of companies don't have them on staff, right? Most of us outside of the consulting world hire guys like you as consultants to do it for a short amount of time to give us an audit or a report, or sometimes it's annually as part of a cycle or something like that, right? But there's not as much demand for pen testing as there is for like blue team, because every company needs blue team in some way, shape, or form. But red team is more of a, hey, we're just crossing our T's and dotting our I's here, guys, right? Like, at least that's kind of the way that I try to explain it to, again, students who are like, I want to do the big, cool, glamorous thing. But am I hitting the mark when I say something like that?
You know what I think one of our most the best services we have is a purple team engagement, where they roll in with 2 blue teamers and 1 red teamer, and the red teamer there is for support, and all they're there to do is take whatever the alerting is in the organization, and the red teamer is peppering through the checklist of all the latest and greatest techniques, and they're tweaking up their alerting to detect those attacks. At this quarter, this point in time, this is the state of the art. And now you have clear and solid alerting for it. And there's a reason that they're rolling with 2 blue teamers and 1 red teamer. Right? What red teamer is the support guy, and the blue teamer is the one getting the work done. And I think that's one of the most impactful services we offer. And I think it's telling that it's a 2-to-1 ratio there. That's where the impact is, right? In the blue team. So, I mean, we love blowing holes and stuff and burning things to the ground, but leaving craters behind us is not improving things. It's identifying, how to keep the next crater from being there. So,
right.
And we don't actually burn things to the ground. we save that for collegiate competition.
We're only saying that because we're being recorded, though.
Yes.
So as far as like breaking into like pen testing as a career, do you have any advice for any of those students that might watch this?
I did it kind of the traditional way. I mean, I was very old. I was like 40 when I got my first pen testing full-time job. But, I got my OSCP, and then, I studied some specific application stuff, and that kind of led to it. OSCP has changed a lot over the years, but it's still highly respected. There's in our field, if someone walks in the door with OSCP, they're going to have instant cred because it is an exceptionally technical, certification. It's very challenging. It's not as important, I don't think, as it was, just because I think OffSec isn't held as in quite such high esteem as they used to be. There's a lot more competition now. They've raised their prices. It's a much more corporate organization these days than it was. But on the flip side, they have invested very heavily in updating the curriculum, which was really desperately needed, right? Personally, I wish they kind of like settled at updating OSCP and not branching out into like 20 other different things, because I think they kind of spread themselves too thin. But they're still excellent certifications, and they're very, very challenging. So that's certainly a good one. But experience. Again, this isn't going to be your first job. Network, go to cons, meet folks, and do hack the box, the CTF challenges. Make sure it's something you actually enjoy doing. And this is almost a cheat on the web app side, because there's an endless supply of legal things to hack in bug bounties. I know the money's probably not as good as it used to be when they first came out. A lot of companies have had bad experiences with bug bounties being just swarmed with garbage submissions. So you have to be very careful to run a quality bug bounty program these days. It's because it's easy to get a lot of noise in there. But on the flip side, if you're looking at it from the tester's perspective, it provides you an endless supply of things to poke at legally if you follow the rules. That's something you're not going to see as much on the network side.
So kind of switching gears on you here. Without identifying like anybody specifically, can you tell us of a time or a funny
it was
story?
Josh. It was Josh.
Probably. What is some of the most obscene stuff that you've seen pen testing?
Oh, yes. I've actually mentioned this on another podcast, and it still boggles my mind to this day. It was a government organization and a huge system, absolutely enormous enterprise web application that was used by tens of thousands of folks. Publicly exposed, had to be, because there were tens of thousands of external users, and really sensitive data in this. Really, really old system that had been around forever. And we were supposed to do like a 8-week pen test. It was a huge system. It was a really long engagement. And a very first day, they give us our testing credentials. We log in, and the first thing we notice is that you log into the application, and the server sends down to your browser your session cookie, right? That your browser will now attach to all the other requests, so the server knows it's you. Well, we noticed that literally absolutely no page in the application ever checks that session, ever. It's essentially an unauthenticated application completely. So you're walking around trying to hand your ID to people to prove who, and no one's checking it. No one's looking. Which has some really interesting side effects. The app seems to be functioning normally, but then you get to something like your profile page. Now it looks like a normal profile page, but this application has absolutely no idea who I am. Right? And there's a change password feature that looks like any other change password feature. And we're looking at this like we got to dig. Like how would this even function in the system? And you pull up the page to change your password. It's got enter your current password and enter your new one twice. And we start looking at the JavaScript code, and the enter your current password is checked against a JavaScript variable in the browser. Which means that the browser knows the plain text password of the user for this check to succeed. Which right there, that's a whole pen test report unto itself, right? But again, the server doesn't know who this person is because it's not checking sessions. So we start to get through the JavaScript some more, and we do find that the username at least is stored in a variable in JavaScript. And then we go trace where that clear text password is coming from, and it turns out there's an API call in the backend that takes one parameter, username, and it returns the plain text password. And it's a completely unauthenticated API that's floating in the breeze on the internet. So we go into have immediately say we need to come into your office and have a discussion. And we meet with the lead engineer on the project, and they're in a very nice suit. Alarm bell should be going off at this point, right? The lead engineer's got a nice suit on, and we're like, well, to start off with, your enterprise application that's absolutely mission critical doesn't check any sessions at all. And he's like, oh, what's a session? And so the fundamental authentication mechanism of web applications. And I actually left that job, that firm, before I found out how they resolved it, because I that's such a big problem. It's hard to struggle to think about how you even begin to mitigate that, because they couldn't take it offline. They couldn't firewall it. It was going to be a massive effort to fix that. And they were going to be exposed for a very long time. But I think that's probably the worst I've seen. I have seen e-commerce systems with RCE on the production servers, where the company wanted to fire the security guy who was pressing to fix it because they thought it would be too expensive. And I was like, oh, that's okay. So, you see some crazy stuff, but most of our clients are really quite good. I used to work in a firm that focused almost solely on finance, banks and stuff in Manhattan, and now I've got a much broader range of clients in my current firm. But I think, at least at my current firm, I think it's kind of a self-selected group of clients that take security more seriously. we're kind of a small boutique firm. And I think we see more secure a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of the time, a more secure program, which I like because that makes us up our game, right?
Mhm.
And that forces us into specialization. I can't do network pen testing and social engineering and cloud and web and reverse engineering. I can't do all that and be really great at it. At some point, I've got to focus to kind of up my game. I'm old. There's only so many tricks I can learn at this point. And so I like being forced into a path like that because I at this point, I have found what I like and I want to keep digging into that. So, and I think if you really are serious about getting into offensive security, at some point you're going to you should try the breadth. Like everyone, I think, should have that opportunity. Go find the quirky little firms that's going to let you do everything and see what you like doing, right? I've had a lot of diverse interests in my careers over the years, and I've enjoyed trying different things. And I've taken steps in one direction and figure out, well, that wasn't it. I should go this direction. And ultimately, you're going to end up something you really like. And I certainly have.
That kind of leads me into my second question that I thought of here. We all met at college. We told you that before.
Mm-hmm.
Using the skill set that you have, can you think of any particular pranks that you have set off, similar to us putting like shutdown scripts in display computers at Walmart and various other places?
While you're recording? No.
Everyone answers it that way.
Plead the fifth.
No.
I didn't say felony. I said prank.
My pre-cyber days back when I was working in a Navy lab. So we used to build flight simulators for the Navy. We of prototype cockpits and stuff for aircraft. And so the lab was like the saddest IT guy you've ever met. And like 8 computer scientists who had root on every single system in the lab. Like there's 140 boxes, Silicon Graphics IRX boxes and Linux boxes, and we had admin root on every single one of them. And this poor guy had to be the IT support person for that disaster, right? Because of course we all know better, right? And the IRX was the main system back then. This was a long time ago. And so when you go to log into an IRX box, like you get like a profile picture of every single user in the system. There was one shared, Unix home file system shared on every box. And there was like no security. I mean, like it was all R login, telnet. There was no SSH going on. And what we would do is we would find new ways of obfuscating where the script was running on some computer somewhere that would keep overwriting our colleagues' profile photos with a donkey. and the trick was, we all had root. You had to figure out which system was making the change because it was the same file system everywhere. And then we got into obfuscating it. It wasn't just cron jobs. It was tacked on to other stuff. And that went on for about 8 months until we were spending about half of our time cooking up new ways. And finally, the lead engineer was like, all right, you guys stop. So this is way too much time invested on donkey photos. That was good times. So, and we also got really good at bypassing firewalls back in the day, until that got really serious in the military. Back when they really tried to tighten things up. But back before then, it was kind of the Wild West, and we had a nice little cat and mouse game with the firewall team at the Navy base, getting stuff in and out. So, I think probably statute of limitations is good on that. So,
I think one of my favorites. I used to work at an elementary school, and on my last day, I was really good friends with their technology teacher, who would teach typing and stuff like that. General concepts to help students be okay on the internet when they're children, that kind of stuff. But since her and I were friends, on the last day on the domain controller, I set up a script that generates a random time interval between 1 minute and 8 hours. And then whenever that time interval would happen, it would just send a little pop-up on her computer that just says, "I'm always watching." And I contacted my replacement and I said, "Leave that there for a few months."
We will be cooking up some new gags for while we're always very professional with our clients, the collegiate cyber defense competition, whereas the blue team is the collegiate and we on the red team, we have a little bit of fun with it. We have some pretty good gag payloads, and I need to cook up some new ones this year. So I've been heads down working on actual real tools for that, but now it's time to start goofing off and coming out with just goofy payloads. We've done, I like replacing their apps with pictures of the app. The whole web app's gone, but here's a screenshot of it. JavaScript payloads that just start spinning. It treats it like a canvas, a rendered canvas, just start spinning it around. You can do basic 2D, 3D graphics in a browser, which is great for gags. Just dumb stuff like that. Make the web app unusable for them, but we can use it.
What's funny, John and I were just talking about collegiate cyber defense competitions earlier today because the Rocky Mountain CCDC is coming up here on February 3rd. And we're talking about getting some teams ready. Is that the kind of thing that you participate in? Like, probably not the Rocky Mountain one, probably more on the East Coast, yeah?
No. I've been doing Mid-Atlantic and Southeast for a couple years now. And awesome. Mid-Atlantic, we've shuffled the team, so we're all really focused on Southeast. So we're going to be flying down to Kennedy Space Center here in a couple weeks. That'd be fun.
Cool. Well, if you ever make it to the Rocky Mountain side, hit us up.
Sounds good. Actually, I have no idea who runs the red team over there. So.
I have no idea either. Actually, I do. I met the guy last year, but I could never remember his name.
Well, I was excited because the Southeast just switched from Kennesaw State University hosting it to Florida Institute of Technology, which is my alma mater. But I've never been to main campus. I went to grad school there for 8 years, but it was always at the Navy base up in Maryland. So I've never once been on main campus, and I was hoping it was going to be there this year, so I'd have an excuse to go. And they're like, "Well, no, we're going to do it at Kennedy Space Center." I was like, "Oh, well, that's a pretty good consolation prize." But yeah, that's if you're a student and you're interested in blue team or even red team, and your school has a CCDC team, get involved. Those students are top notch. I don't know if any of those students walk out of that place without a job offer. That place is swarming with recruiters. I have been nothing but, completely amazed by the students and what they're able to do, and yet somehow we still find a way to burn all their stuff to the ground. But they do great, and we're very proud of them. And,
they try hard.
And a lot of the red team, yeah, well, we do. That's our job. But a lot of the red team is ex-blue teamers. When they graduate, a lot of them come back to be on the red team. So there's a lot of cross-pollination there, and it's really great to see. So
at those events, I usually serve as an observer, so white team as a referee, because I'm not a coach. We have a professor for that. And so what I do is I referee, make sure they're not cheating, make sure they follow the rules, make sure they're not like pre-downloading scripts and accessing, ChatGPT while they're in the middle of a competition, stuff like that. But my first bit of advice to them every time, because you can always see in the middle of a competition, they get stressed out, they get worn out, and then they think this whole thing is pointless because they think they're set up to fail. And I tell them straight up, I'm like, you were never going to win against these guys with 20 years of experience. That's not the point. The point of this competition is to learn how to communicate and just kind of feel what the worst of this could ever be. You're never going to have a situation this bad in your real life, hopefully.
Yes. Oh yeah, they have 10 years of worst case scenarios in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think a lot of students forget that they're not competing against the red team.
Correct.
They're competing against the other schools. And
right.
If you Google around students, someone may have published an excellent guide on strategies for winning CCDC. Rob Fuller. It's right on the internet. Just go Google it. It'll come right up. And it'll lay out a good game plan. And it doesn't involve poking the red team in the eye or trying to compete with the red team. That's not the strategy. No, it's a great organization, and I do wish it's scaled. Right, you can't scale CCDC; it just doesn't work. Things like NCL scale great, but it's a very different kind of flavor of opportunity and learning environments there. But I think NCL's done a pretty good job with tying into metrics for skills that they can show off to potential employers. That does scale well, but I think they're resource starved as well. I think some of the challenges don't get updated as much as everyone would like, but that's a tough thing to do. So
I have one more question that I can think of, and then I'm tapped out on questions. I know what keeps me up at night as someone on blue team. I know what keeps me up at night. What keeps a pen tester up at night?
Absolutely nothing.
Sorry. We sleep like babies. It's great.
We do. I know you hate to hear that. You know what keeps me up at night is the code on my brain. Like I get these big coding projects, and I think this is one reason I like pen testing, because I don't have to code like that all the time. Like I can code really heavily on something on my nights and weekends for 2 weeks, and I can't get out of my head. I will wake up at 2 a.m. with solutions and code running through my brain. But that was my life in my 20s and 30s when I coded full-time as a job. I could never turn it off. But now it's optional. Like I can buckle down for 2 weeks, do it, and I won't sleep for 2 weeks, but I'll get a huge amount of code done. And then I'll stop and get it out of my brain, go do something else, read a book, play some video games, do something with the kids, whatever. And I'll catch up on sleep. But it's really self-inflicted stuff to me that gets me. And it honestly, it's coding. To this day, after all these years, I can't stop coding in my head if I'm sucked into it. So
Red teamers only have to be right once. We got to be right.
Yeah, but we're right like 6,000 times.
That's when it's a big problem for the blue teamers.
Yeah, we don't tell you about the 6,000 things that didn't work. We just show you when we got the shell to pop, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned conferences getting involved. I know ShmooCon was one that we discussed prior to you being on the show. And I guess you're saying it's the last one. Tell us a little bit about ShmooCon.
This one coming up in 2025 is the last one. The Potter family and crew have been doing this. I can't remember how long they've been doing ShmooCon, but it's in DC at the Washington Hilton. They cap it to about 2,500 folks. It's infamous because the tickets are gone in about a quarter second.
Wow.
They do 3 drops. It drops at noon. And 1 second after noon, if you did not refresh the right page and answer the question that popped up quickly, you missed it. They're gone. And you get 3 tries at that. So the strategy we have, I've got a group of friends that we're all trying. And if you win, you can buy 2 tickets. Some of us are submitting talks. We're all trying at the ticket drops. If you win competitions there at ShmooCon, you can win a chance to get a ticket for the next year, things like that. But as a team effort, we've done pretty well the past couple of years of getting everyone a ticket somehow. So, but it's also one of those conferences that would be great for LobbyCon because it is at a hotel. You may miss the talks and the downstairs stuff, but you can come up. Everyone's hanging out in the lobby of the hotel, and it's a great crew. I mean, the DC area has got an incredible cybersecurity industry and culture. And you get people coming down from Philly, from New York. I like to drive up from North Carolina, where I am now, and it's just a great crowd. So, and I see a lot of the CCDC teammates there. We kind of always have like an informal meetup, and it's been a great time. It's a really chill conference and good talks, and we're all going to miss it a lot for sure. But I'm sure the Potter family is exhausted after all these years of putting this on. This is not their full-time job, supposedly, but I think they probably treat it largely like a full-time job. So conferences are tough. They're hard to organize.
Well, that means you're the next organizer, right? You're going to take it and run with it?
I'm not ShmooCon, but I am working on a couple of conferences right now.
Oh, there you go.
So, and yeah. I will be cursing next year when I see how bad it is on the other side. So
I'm always
nothing to the scale of ShmooCon.
I'm always afraid to go because I have a pacemaker. So I feel like if I go to one of these places, I'm just going to like walk through the door and go, someone's like, do I need to wear a Faraday cage around me so that I'm safe? Or
I mean, you wouldn't have to, but if you did, you wouldn't look out of place. So
what quality of
pretty
Faraday cage?
I mean, it's
going to shock me.
I think you'd probably see more of that at DEF CON than you would at really any other conference. So
hasn't been a problem.
At least the ones that I attend.
I felt a little weird on some of the ones that I went to with John, but I think it's just because I had to look at his face, not so much, my actual pacemaker. But
Well, okay, I got a proposal for you. We can test this out because, so at 1,000 subscribers, maybe Josh shaves his head, but you wrap yourself in tinfoil and you go to a conference.
nope.
I like this.
Not worth it. Risk it.
5,000 subscribers. Shannon has to go to DEF CON wrapped in tinfoil for at least an hour.
Be like, well, I guess he was wrong. Thanks, guys.
I mean, especially DEF CON, no one's going to bat an eye. So.
It's Vegas. That happens all the time. It's normal there.
Yeah. I can say I've taken a couple years off from DEF CON, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. So it's just gotten too crowded, I think. So, but it's too loud. Smaller conferences, I think, are a lot of fun. So,
More personal.
Drew, one of the things that you mentioned to us is that you developed a new tool that you released about Red Team to attack like web apps. Did you want to talk a little bit about that? Plug it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's what it is a JavaScript payload. I write more JavaScript than anyone else who hates the language that I know. I think it's a terrible, terrible programming language. But from an attacker's perspective, it's running in a really cool place, right? So what this tool does is it attacks the client, right? Not the server at all. It starts instrumenting the client side of the application so that as a user, and you can use it as like a cross-site scripting payload. I think probably the easiest way to use it is a post-exploitation implant. You get in there, you just add it into the code of the app. And then when a user is using the application, it's watching everything they do. It's screenshotting as they go through the application. It's keylogging everything they type. So what you do is you force them into a certain page. Like it's got a persistence mechanism where it pops open an iframe. So no matter where they hit the payload, whether it was a malicious link to some random page or they stumble upon it in the app, I can put them wherever I want them to be in the app, in the iframe. And then you spoof the address bar. So it looks normal to them, but they're still on the page that has the payload running. And as long as they're using the app in that iframe, they never actually really left the page with the vulnerability, so the payload keeps running. But it also makes it really easy to instrument that iframe. Doesn't have to be an iframe, but that's the nice persistence mechanism. And then, so if I get them to click a malicious link to some random page, but this phishing email says, hey, go log in, and what they see is the login page and the address is right, they're going to think they're on the login page and type in their creds. Well, I just keylog that. Sends it out. It grabs screenshots. It grabs the HTML code. So I had a nice demo. My ShmooCon talk was a nice demo of this. That's up on YouTube. My Wild West Hackin' Fest isn't public yet. That was kind of a longer talk where I ranted for a while and then did the demo. ShmooCon was just the demo, so less ranting. Honestly, I think the ShmooCon one turned out better. But I think probably my favorite feature of it is JavaScript networking calls, like XHR and fetch APIs are commonly used for making that background network communications. So you have nice dynamic apps and the network communications happening in the background. Well, JavaScript lets JavaScript rewrite other JavaScript. So malicious payloads could just rewrite your application client-side code, which is really dumb. But worse yet, you can rewrite the network implementation too. So it taps all the network comms for between the client and the server if they're using the XXR or fetch API. In practice, I see a lot of devs are using jQuery, which is really, really common. That gets caught up by the XHR instrumentation because that's what jQuery is built on top of. So you get a copy of all the network communications and the API keys. And it ends up in a nice UI. So you can get clients on one side and like some stats, their IP, operating system. You click the client, then you get the time series of events of what was monitored, and you can kind of keep an eye on everyone. If you've ever played with the B framework from back in the day, it's kind of like that, but really focused on. My boss said, "Don't call it spyware." So you're definitely not spying on the user. You're just watching them.
Surveillance.
Intensely. So, but yeah, I mean, from the red team's perspective, it would be like, we found a way to drop this in a JavaScript file that's used by the app, or we found a cross-site scripting vulnerability or something like that where they can sneak it in there. But they may be able to get creds, push further into the app. They may be able to steal that sensitive data our client might be, interested in protecting. We find some way of getting to that. And I kind of built it because I think there's definitely criminal organizations out there that are focused on web apps, right? Like criminal organizations and bug bounty folks have an advantage because they can specialize. They can shop targets looking for very specific things that they know how to monetize very well, right? So, criminal organizations grabbing accounts and credit cards off of web apps, they find vulnerabilities. And they've got great tooling. They just got to find some sketchy JavaScript coders and they can go to town with stuff like this. But a red team, pen testers, we have to be a little bit more generic, right? Jack of all trades, because we don't pick our targets, whatever the client brings to us. And I think red teams in particular are often very network centric in their backgrounds. We do have web app folks that work with the red team, but a lot of them are really thinking network infiltration. Whereas there are criminal organizations that are focused much more on web. So I wanted to kind of give them a generic tool that can kind of give them some capability in this area without giving criminals something great that they don't already have. If this is their specialty, they get better stuff in this anyways. This is going to miss most credit card, the way most e-commerce, this isn't going to get you the credit cards the way that's implemented in most sites. A little bit more custom code will, but I didn't put that in there, right? So, because red team doesn't need that. So, so I was trying to, it's a delicate balance, right? This is all dual edge stuff, right? You're trying to release something useful to clients so that they can learn what these attacks look like and how to defend against it. And it's pretty easy, don't have cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, keep the red team off your servers, and then have, constant security policies to really harden it down. And bam, this kind of attack isn't going to work. Even the higher end stuff that the criminals have, like these things will protect you. Almost, in the vast majority of cases, but it's hard to make those arguments without some proof of concept to show the client what that attack looks like. And I think that's something a lot of red teams are going to be a little bit weaker on. So I'm hoping to see some use.
Nice.
We'll see.
So the first thing we should do
it's
is
a lot of JavaScript code. It's terrible. It's free. It's on my GitHub. I mean, that's
All right, we'll definitely try to include the link as well when we post this. I know earlier you mentioned, when you're not coding and stuff like that, you like to kind of play a game or disconnect a little bit. Tell us your favorite way to disconnect. What do you like to do when you're trying to get your mind off of work and all this tech world?
I take the kids to the beach because it's like right there. We're beach bums. We spend a lot of time at the beach or goofing off in the sound and fishing and just doing stupid stuff like that. And that's fine. That's why I hate winter, because it's like the 4 weeks of the year that we can't do that. It's pretty warm here typically, but there's nothing to do when the beach is closed. Yeah. So it's a pretty boring place in the winter, even if it is short. So it's a great spot for outdoor activities, and the kids like doing outdoor stuff. I'm sure by the time they're ready to go to college, they're going to be so sick of the beach, but they still love it. So we're going to keep enjoying that while we can. That is a key life trick: is marry a marine biologist so that you always live at a beach. So.
Nice. What was her favorite beach? I'm sure you've been to a lot.
Honestly, so I mean, it's weird that we live at the beach and a lot of our vacations are going to other beaches. But Ocracoke Island, it's just a couple islands up the Outer Banks, but it's a cool little village, and it's hard to get to for most people because it's like you can only get there by ferry, and you have to drive forever to get to one of these ferry terminals that will get you there. And we're actually like only 50 minutes from one of the ferry terminals, so it's really not that hard for us to get there. And it's a great island. It's great restaurants, and it's really laid back. It's kind of Caribbeanish feel, and we go there quite a bit. So
Nice. That probably stole some thunder from my. I wanted to give you 5 rapid questions that we want to, I think, give to all our interviews for this season. And one of them was your favorite vacation spot. Would you call that your vacation spot? Your favorite one to go to?
yeah, we typically don't go to the same one over and over, but this is kind of our like local, easy, long weekend kind of one. So that's the one that we do on a regular basis.
Nice. All right. So here's the other 4. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke,
Your favorite streaming service?
Spotify,
Favorite tech released in the last 5 years?
Jeez, so much for rapid.
I'm thinking the same thing. Holy crap, Josh.
I mean, you're a techie, so it's probably that one's I should have saved that one
I'm
for
a
last.
bad techie. I mean, all my new gadgets are like ham radio and stuff. It's all like really old stuff. So, I mean, my amp is a vacuum tube here. I mean, I don't know. So maybe I'm not so good at the high tech stuff. I love my PS5. I don't play it that much, but on the rare occasions that I do love the PlayStation 5.
Nice. And what's your favorite game?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes.
Haven't played it in a long time, but man, that's a great one.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else got another one? I know we've taken a lot of Drew's time, and we're definitely very grateful for it. Thank you, Drew.
I just want to say thank you for
I
taking your
appreciate
time.
the opportunity to come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Drew.
Cool.
Great to meet you,
Yeah.
man. This was fun.
I see that Wild West Hacking Fest is in Deadwood, South Dakota. I think I want to go.
It's gorgeous. It's really amazing. And actually, so last year was my first time, and I just basically flew in and out for the conference. I hung out with a bunch of friends, and I was really kicking myself for not going extra time to go hiking because this is just amazing. So I've already booked a house for me and my friends for an entire week for next year. So we'd go out early, do a bunch of hiking, and then go to the conference. It's a weird one because one thing that I like about conferences like ShmooCon is you meet students, right? You meet young folks. This is a really different feel to it because it's so hard to get there, and it is expensive. That you have this down self-selection. It's basically everyone is like a rock star there, and you don't have the students, which sounds like it would be a bad thing, but it's like this one refreshing where everyone is just genius at everything. And it's a really interesting place to just soak up knowledge, right? Talk to people and I wouldn't want every conference to be like that, but having one that kind of has that very different feel, because I love talking to students and people who are trying to break in the industry, but this one's got a different feel to that. Just because I think it's hard to get to. You got to really want to go. So, but it's worth going.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Learned a lot from you. I definitely enjoyed working you back in the day. Sort of wish we still worked together.
Just a few years
Yeah,
ago.
just a few. I had like maybe 3 more hairs on my head. So
You can always come to the dark. You can come to the dark side and be a consultant. So there's worse things in life.
I don't know if I could do the reporting. I hate reports.
Oh, it's so easy. You know what I did? Like right after I took the job at Trusted Sec, right? I moved to Australia for a
Oh
year.
yeah, that's right.
And like almost none of the clients had any idea that I was in Australia. That's just an IP coming from New York. That's all they know, right? It's a guy on the phone. So that flexibility is incredible.
Yeah,
So
definitely is.
I see my kids a lot more these days, being a work at home consultant. So that's a pretty good benefit in my book. So
Yeah, definitely.
anyways, I'll stop keeping you guys up.
No, it's good. Thank you.
I will be
Thank you.
expecting.
Thanks for watching.
I will
Thanks for
be
listening.
expecting. Yeah. No, but the list of Josh's worst fears and embarrassing moments, you know how to get in touch with me. So
I'll send them on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I sent you a LinkedIn
right.
invite already. I'm like, yep, they're coming.
excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Hope you guys have
Thank
a
you
great
again,
night.
Drew.
All right. Thanks,
again.
Drew.